So I am a big fan of Spring Cloud Contract. It's something I use in my professional job, and I even have an open source contribution to Spring Cloud Contract for defining contracts using Open API. In this video, I'm going to sit down and talk to Marcin, who's the founder of Spring Cloud Contract, not only about Spring Cloud Contract, consumer-driven contracts, why you want to be using consumer-driven contracts, and then we're going to start talking about his brand new course covering Spring Cloud Contract. So I'm going to jump over to the interview now. I really hope you enjoy it. It was a pleasure talking to Marcin about not only Spring Cloud Contract and also his new course. All right, we're talking with Marcin, and I have no idea how to pronounce your last name. I'm not going to try that. But he's created a new course called Hands-On Guide to Spring Cloud Contract, Creating Consumer-Driven Contracts to Leverage Contract Test and Improve Your Code. So that's kind of a mouthful. I think a lot of people don't even understand the concept of consumer-driven contracts. So I don't think that the community in general has a lot of awareness of that. So can you define in a nutshell what a consumer-driven contract is?
So in a nutshell, in my opinion, consumer-driven contracts testing is a process where actually it's the consumers that drive the change of and creation of the API. And that makes a lot of sense because, come to think of it, the consumers are called consumers because they consume the API. Yep. So they actually know how to use it, right? The producers typically don't call themselves, they don't send a request to their API, right? Mm-hmm. So consumer-driven contracts are about, let's say, shifting this approach and making the consumers define the API, but also it allows you to generate or use such a process where you can be sure that the integration tests that you're running as consumers make sense. Because if the consumers are those that create the stubs of the services that they're calling, the moment the stubs are written, they're already outdated, or from the very beginning, they might have had nothing to do with the reality. Mm-hmm. So leveraging the consumer-driven contracts or contract tests as such, we want to be sure that the validity and the reusability of the stubs used during the integration tests makes sense, and that the API that we're building is nice and is usable by the consumers.
Yeah, that actually make a lot of sense. And at Velo, as you know, one of the hats I've been starting to wear is taking care of our public-facing APIs, and kind of how I got down the road of looking at consumer-driven contracts, because we got to the point of what defines the API. So what should the API actually be doing? Because if you don't have consumers driving it, a developer can go in and make a change in behavior of the API, add a data field, or make something required. Nobody really knows. And then you might have a Jira ticket over here and the code doing this and a test doing this. So it got to the point of what is that API? What is the source of truth of what that API is supposed to do? So
yeah, that's really interesting, because in your case, you're actually doing the producer contract approach, because you have a lot of consumers and you don't really know. It's impossible to maintain all the requirements, so to say. So you're at the point where you define, this is our API, this is how you use it, but these are the sample scenarios, so to speak, right? Given this, we're going to return that. So it's much more than a schema. Those are the usage scenarios, and it's really interesting to hear this feedback from somebody doing producer contract deliberately from the very beginning. So yeah, to some extent, when you have the public-facing API, there's no other way than actually do that.
Yeah, and wearing this hat, it's like, okay, so if I have 1,000 people using this API, how do I ensure that I don't break them with a change accidentally?
Yeah. In one of my previous jobs, we had this Boy Scout rule. So it was this approach that when you went to the code, you had to fix small things, improve a for loop here, improve an if-else statement there. But one of the junior developers decided to fix a typo in the API. And it was great on the server side, but all the consumers were not informed of the fixing typo. So it was broken, right? So with frameworks like Spring Cloud Contract, those kind of things would be caught, because you would fix the typo in the code, but your contract tells you to actually have the typo, however it sounds, which is good, because it would be disallowed to actually do it, right? You would have to do it in a non-breaking way, meaning adding a field which is that doesn't have a typo, and for some time maintain two versions, right?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Just a simple property name change can cause havoc downstream, big time havoc.
Correct.
So brought up spring cloud contracts. So exactly what I want to go into next. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of spring cloud contract?
Sure. So, in one of my previous jobs, we had exactly the same problem as everybody that is migrating from, monolith to a microservice environment, so to say. So we had a monolithic application in the middle, and we had, let's say, Sun-like architecture. So there were microservices popping around, and every microservice was asking the monolith for the same data. So every single team did the same work of creating a stub of the monolith. And the funny thing was that nobody shared those. We used WireMock back then, so nobody shared the WireMock stubs. So everybody had to do the same work, and it was useless because the monolith changed, but the stubs didn't. So we got really angry with this, and we started to build a solution. Why did we? The solution was called Accurist back then. Why didn't we pick some other frameworks that were there on the market, so to say? That's because all the other frameworks are using a consumer contract approach, meaning the consumers can say, this is how we want the API of the producer to look like. They could send this requirement out there and break the producer. From our perspective, that was unacceptable because the consumers, okay, they can have their requirements or actually those suggestions, but they can't demand it, they can't enforce it because it's the producer that takes responsibility of the code, right?
Yeah.
So we built a solution called Accurist where we shifted this around. So we said that the ownership for the contracts is on the producer side, or maybe ownership is split between the consumer and producer, but the responsibility is on the producer side. So the consumers can suggest a change, right? Send a pull request instead of enforcing it. So that was the main let's say reason for starting it from scratch. And it was created, it was founded like, I don't want to lie, like 5 years ago. So it's not a new tool. And then after my joining Pivotal, after some time we decided to take it into the Spring Cloud portfolio, and now it's called Spring Cloud Contract.
Yep. So yeah, that's an interesting evolution of how it got there. And from my experience, it seems a little overwhelming when you first start working with it because there are a lot of moving parts to it. And I'm still getting myself up to speed on everything that it can do. And actually, some of the capabilities are very, very important. I mean, there's a lot of robust capabilities to it. So it's clear that it's been around and maintained and developed over time.
Sure. I mean, we have a very vivid community, a lot of requirements for new enhancements. But let's say in this simple example, once you get your head around who the consumer and the producer is, because even I, at the very beginning, had a problem with that. But once you understand the flow, for the simple cases, and let's say from my point of view, you should always make the contract as simple as possible. And I see that the community is often trying to, unfortunately, let's say, convert their end-to-end tests, like the functional tests, to contract tests, which is not a good idea. And then they create very complex contracts, which become very difficult to maintain and to support, etc.
Yeah.
We know, however, that let's say the documentation of the project is gigantic. It has all the pieces out there, but it has its problems. Let's put it like this. So one of the key things for the upcoming, let's say, weeks, months, is to do some sort of internal refactoring of the project, but also with this, also a gigantic refactoring of the documentation to make it more, let's say, usage based, maybe, because right now it's more technical. but we want to take a step back and let's say have the main documentation that shows you, for example, how to use consumer-driven contracts with Git as a let's say place where you store contracts, right? Instead of having this is stub runner with Git, this is contract verifier with Git in the various places of the documentation, right? So we're hearing the feedback from the users, and even had 2 event storming sessions recently about Spring contract. One was internal for let's say me and Olga, and it was done by Jakub Pilimon, and the second one was done with our users. So a couple of users, both from Poland and Europe, came to Warsaw, and we had a big event storming session related to Spring contract. So one of the points, let's say, if the feedback that we got was that we have to work a little bit more on the documentation, which we will.
Yep. Yeah, and I can see that, and it's not meant as a criticism, because our experience at the company I'm working for now, we have a lot of very talented people. I mean, we have a lot of gray-haired developers. So, I mean, a lot of us have been at this for 15, 20 years, and we encounter problems with it. So, as far as our adaption, we started moving towards it, ran into some issues, came back from it. And then now on the public-facing APIs, we're seeing more of a need and trying to go back to it. But amongst us, there's an ongoing discussion saying, what do we test? Where do we test? Because we do. There's a lot of overlap going on, and that's kind of why we're now going. This is actually probably the better tool, and it solves a lot of these other pain points that we're having with the other stuff and all the overlap that we have. So.
Yeah, sure. So we value the feedback. So if you have any feedback that you want to give us regarding the documentation or the process, we're more than happy to take it and to make the community happy with the tool, right?
Yeah, and it's a great tool. I think it's just it can be overwhelming because you're defining the contracts, and it's generating JUnit tests, and it's generating wiremark stuff, and you're like, okay, I defined this, and then, it created that. Okay, that's kind of cool.
And also it creates the jar where it's packaging the stuff. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff is automated, so you don't have to do it. But in order to grasp it, indeed, you have to, because unlike other tools in the Spring, let's say, portfolio, at least to some extent, here you have the whole process. It's not. It's an implementation of a process, right? So you have to understand the process first.
Yep.
If you don't get it, the tool is useless, right? I'm not saying that it's like a unique thing in the Spring portfolio, but typically you have a tool that solves a particular problem, for example, with a database, or sending a REST call, or sending a messaging call. But here you have consumer, producer, those starts, they have to communicate, file a pull request, discuss, work offline, write a test, TDD on the level of architecture, the test is passing, file a pull request, analyze the pull request, generate the tests, write the missing implementation, merge the pull requests, come back. So
and then it becomes even more complicated because not my company's in financial services, so now you have a regulatory aspect where you,
of course,
proving and making sure that you are properly documenting your changes, why you're documenting or why you're changing stuff. So you just can't go haphazardly saying, I'll throw in a property here and I'll create this new API. So, which
is actually in the process of Spring contract that is aligned, because you can't change the API directly as a consumer. You can suggest a change. So it's already audited because there's a pull request, and the producer has to say, okay, I merge it. Right? So from the very beginning, we had the very same idea, because we couldn't just comprehend that there is an option of, let's say, demanding a change of the API because I'm a consumer and I'm just demanding that this is done. Right? This is not the way we thought it could be possible to work. Right?
Yeah, and I could see also people coming on board, because I just recently completed I'm actually adding a little more content to it, just testing Spring Boot, a whole course on testing Spring Boot. But I mean, you need the skills, everything I teach in that course, you need the skills to effectively use Spring Cloud Contract, because underneath the covers, you're going to be testing Spring, you're going to be using Makito, you're going to be using.
You actually don't have to use Spring at all, right? Because if it's a JVM project, you can use a JUnit rule. If it's a non-JVM project, you can use a Docker container. But yeah, sure, if you want to understand how things work, you have to have this knowledge.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving pieces to it. So I would like to get back to your course that's come out. That's why we're chatting today. So I am the average enterprise developer, kind of interested in consumer-driven contracts. I happen to be in a Java shop. What can I expect from the course that you produced?
So from the course, you can expect a couple of things. First, how you should test your software. I'm describing, like basic stuff from my experience, from my perspective. What actually a unit is in terms of unit tests, what the integration tests are, how you can leverage, tools like if it's necessary for you, like test containers to do some sort of testing. If you need to do some, let's say, end-to-end tests, how you can do it in an automated fashion, that you run just, clean install or something like this, or Gradle clean build, and the whole machinery is started automatically, that you don't have to do it manually. So this is the beginning, and then I'm sure what contract tests are. How does it fit in? Which layer do we want to test? And then we're going, step by step by various pieces of Spring Cloud contract framework, of the DSLs, of the setups, of the plugins, base class definitions, etc. There's one extremely interesting, because all of the chapters are interesting, of course, but there's one very interesting, which shows you the full process from the beginning until the end, from both the consumer and the producer side, with all the, let's say, infrastructure out there, like Artifactory, Jenkins, GitLab. So I'm just simulating being the producer, the consumer, and going through the whole process of the consumer-driven contracts or contract testing as such. Also, there are like things that show you how you can tweak the framework in various ways, how you can extend it, how you can add your own stuff. Like, for example, I'm showing how you could define DSL using a properties file. Of course, it's a very simple thing that I'm doing there, but I'm showing how we could do it, and it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are various things that I'm showing there, including also exactly showing how you can test your non-JVM application. For example, I'm using a Javelin framework there, how I can test a Javelin application using Spring Cloud Contract. And also I'm showing the non-JVM based projects, how to work with them, and how to say test them when they are the producer side, and how to test them when they're the consumer side.
Okay. Actually, I might enroll in the course myself.
You should.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. Definitely some good stuff. So I am going to get a link to the course, definitely, and I'll be putting this video up on YouTube and letting everybody in my little realm of Spring Framework viewers know about the course. So,
awesome, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's good stuff. I'm obviously a fan of Spring Cloud Contract. I've been using it for a bit now. It is a very feature-rich and mature product, and I mean, I'm still learning stuff about it.
So am I. Actually, when I was going through the framework. When preparing for the course, I found quite a couple of features that I've forgotten about. And they're not documented.
Oh, that does that.
Yeah, which was hilarious.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and I'm actually an advocate for what the company I work for, and we're trying to expand our use on it just because of the problems. And I mean, you laid out a lot of them, and it's like, yeah, we're feeling those exact pain points. And, that's why we are adapting it more for
awesome. Great. And
like,
congrats on the plugin, because every single time people ask about this, and I'm pointing to your extension.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always somebody asking about Swagger. Always.
Yeah. And our use right now, need to go down that road, but I do have a DSL parser for where you can define contracts in Open API Swagger, and it's been working well for us because now we do have the contracts defined there, but we're setting up the test. Also, guys from Atlassian have a Swagger validator, so every request response is going to be inspected against the Open API specification. So your entire schema gets flagged. So if you're missing a required property for your documentation, your test is going to fail. So
cool.
That's bringing a lot of value, and I kind of feel like now we're actually getting to a single source of truth of what that API is supposed to do.
Which is perfect, exactly.
So it's been exciting, and thank you very much for your help on getting
no problem.
It's actually becoming a nearly usable product now. So, it's kind of in beta, but I think it's getting pretty mature to the point where it can start being leveraged more. So
cool.
All right, I'm going to end this and stop this recording. And in the links to this video, there will be a link to your course where people can
awesome.